so excited to talk to Marni Kitching today. Marni and I met, I don't even know how, but whenever we get together, we just cannot stop talking and we dive deep into the real and meaningful stuff. So I'm so pleased to introduce Marni. Marni, tell us a little bit about you, what your role is and what your professional history is.
Yeah, I always feel like I need to pull up my LinkedIn page to kind of remember everything. But ultimately, I work in organizational development. Worked for a number of different organizations, and organizational development, if you're not sure exactly what that is, it's about the people experience within an organization. So it's right from the beginning, like the onboarding experience. It covers off on things like talent acquisition and how we attract talent, to all the way through their learning journey and their growth journey. It also covers things like capability frameworks. It covers engagement, how we, communication, well-being within the workplace. So it touches a few areas, and just generally how we organize our ways of working within the workplace so that people are engaged, growing, and in line with the mission and vision of the company, as well as outworking the values as well. So it touches a lot of areas. So it's a busy role. And I sort of started in this space more in a learning and development, training, coaching. That's kind of my background, and kind of moved more in an OD direction. Yeah.
What draws you to this function?
Yeah, good question. I'm very big on, I guess you could say that the OD space, the organizational development space, very much looks at culture as opposed to just training and learning. And, I just have a fascination with culture. I think organizational culture, because I think that sets the space, the standard, the experience from a very holistic picture. So so I love that. And I think there's a lot of moving parts in that go into that. And it's not, whereas was before just in learning and development, it is really about, here's a skill that you need this. Whereas this kind of lends to the holistic view of learning and growth and development, which might be just the way we have policies and procedures and the tools that we use in the workplace and how people interact with that, and the language we use and the naming conventions that we have and the titles and the whole bunch of other things that sometimes feel so nuanced, but they are major to someone's experience. Like, you think about in culture in general, it's very difficult to pinpoint it, but when you walk into someone's family, and you have a different experience just by the way that they interact with each other compared to somewhere else that you might go. So I like digging into that, and because ultimately I just care about people and I want to see them thrive. So yeah.
What's the relationship between culture and performance?
Oh, they're very interlinked. Yeah. I think ultimately, I would say that most leaders, they want to create a culture where their people can thrive and they can perform and do well. But they don't necessarily recognize that culture has a lot to do with that. So, and if you take it back to that family example, I want to create a culture within my family where my children feel safe. They feel like they are protected. They feel like they have cheerleaders, they feel like it's fun and there's variety, and, it's a place that they can bring other people into as well. So, that exact example that I just showed you or explained is probably the same as what we want for our workplaces, where people feel safe, they feel like they can thrive. And the way that we set that up is the culture. we want to set, and it has to do with a whole bunch of things, which I'm sure you're going to ask me about. But yeah, but it's really, really important, because otherwise, if you don't have a good culture, then your people will not perform well. It's just a given. So.
And this is emergent. Like I said, once we get chatting, my brain shoots off in all these different directions. I remember a time when we used to talk about a knowledge economy, right when the internet was coming through and you could research things. And so, the best thing you could do for your staff and your employee was to meet that hunger to learn and grow. And it was really knowledge based, I think. The more you can equip people with a set of transferable skills and knowledge, they'll feel like they're growing in your company. I feel like that has shifted now. Like that's almost a given. If you're not training, developing, providing people opportunities to learn, it's just an amoeba in terms of where other organizations are at. What is it that people are looking for now from organizations? What is the key thing for them now? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And look, obviously we've got to talk about COVID. That's definitely got to
please.
Played a huge part in this. And I think, look, it's a bit of a bugbear of mine, because I think there's a lot of organizations that are really suffering to find good talent and to find, great resources to come on their team. And I think they're missing the fact that it's a competitive market out there for job seekers. They have choice and options now like never before. And one of the big cry outs is autonomy. People want autonomy. They've had this flexibility brought before them, and they loved it. They may not necessarily want to work completely at home, or it could look different for different people in different organizations, but they want to feel empowered to make choices, feel empowered to be a part of different projects, potentially even not siloed. That's another really big thing. So people get kind of they're given a job title and that's all you're allowed to do, as opposed to other workplaces that are now providing these options of, okay, you work over here and you work over here, but we're going to put this project before you. If you want to get involved, we'll give you that option. And people are wanting autonomy to have choice, whether it be that they work partially from home, but also being empowered to kind of really influence their own career trajectory and their own pathway, and have a culture that cultivates that, helps that, rather than, I'm just turning up to my job so I can pay for my mortgage, and you're giving me a bunch of courses to do, and that's great.
Right.
I feel knowledge. What am I going to do with that knowledge now? That's really the question, isn't it? That's the next step. You're right. There was this whole knowledge thing, but now I want to do something with it. And knowledge is at their fingertips. I want to be able to actually make an impact. I want to do meaningful work.
Yeah. You don't actually need an organization anymore to feed you knowledge. It's so readily accessible. Yeah. And so if that is the case, I think one of the things that, like in my industry, because we're a people industry, I think there's a belief that we still need to come back together to connect. It's the culture piece, How does culture and autonomy fit? Like if we're doing our own projects, or we're having lots of flexibility and we're job designing our roles, how do we then do that together? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's really important. So sure, when I say autonomy, just sort of, I guess it's about having choice and options, whereby you can get involved if you want, like we're doing this project, I would love you to be involved if you don't, if you want to do something else. But in terms of the people piece and meeting together, look, I've been talking to a lot of people about this, where there's, if we sort of go down this chat about the hybrid and, working, people, I think it was Elon Musk just recently said, right, everybody's back in the workplace and And someone was saying to me that they're like, oh, well, everyone's going to follow suit. Actually, no, in Australia, that hasn't happened. People are still wanting to work from home and do that hybrid thing. But I think that we have to be really smart about how we bring people together. So, for example, if you're doing a project, you could use the Agile methodology, whereby I think is an amazing methodology where you bring different people from different teams to work on particular projects together, and they've got a certain time frame to do it, and you give them a really good chunk of time each day to get that task out. And what you're going to find is those people that they're cross-pollinating, and they're meeting and working with people that wouldn't normally meet with. I think that's a really good way to do it. I think it's also just actually having cadence. And you and I talked about this yesterday, creating meeting points throughout the week, throughout the day, throughout the month that are like, we're going to get together and we're going to be discussing this, whether it be a meeting, whether it be a social event online or in person, but actually setting a cadence for that collaboration and coming together. I think even though people do want that autonomy, they do recognize that collaboration and connection is still important. It's a human need. So we're not throwing that out.
Absolutely.
But I think there's got to be a greater sense of trust. And I know that that's so hard for a lot of leaders. But I think if you manage it well, you can create it.
I'm going to self-disclose here, because I think that for many leaders, we think trust is transactional. What I'm going to do for you and what you're going to do for me. And so that keeps us dependent on one another. Since I started my leadership studies, and because of my clin psych background, I've been thinking a lot about the basic human need for belonging. It's oxytocin. It's the hormone that binds us, whether it's in sex or whether it's a parent to a child. It's a really core need. And I think perhaps organizations of past naturally had ways to have oxytocin flowing through your teams, because you lived closer together. You had more time, more space to, go for the after hours drinks and all of that. There was a natural rhythm to life. Whereas I think we now have to be more intentional, and actually see that before you can get, it's not even a transactional trust. It's so foundational. It's oxytocin. Do I trust you as a human being? How do I know that if I give the majority of my life to coming to this place, I'm going to be safe, I'm going to be valued, I'm going to be seen as a human being? And you and I were talking about this, how sometimes leaders can also be a little bit like, oh, but what if they cry? What if we get so deep into that personal stuff, and then it all falls apart? And I think you were saying something along the lines of understanding what authenticity in the workplace is.
Look, I was just having a chat to one of my direct reports on this the other day. I see a lot of leaders really struggling with that, being an authentic leader and leading out of authenticity with the balance of I want to be professional. There's got to be some layer of boundary here. So how do I be authentic in that at the same time? How do I develop trust, like you were talking about before? And I just cannot help be authentic. I am one that will put my heart on my sleeve. I sort of bend that way. Not everyone's different. I get it. So I have to be careful not to fall too far down that path. But this is the way I put it. I say, look, I'm going to be real with you. I'm going to ask you real questions. I value you as a human being. We've just got to come back to the fact that we're all humans. Like we're not robots. And so there are real people with real lives doing this work. And we really want to show that compassion and that empathy. But I have this open conversation with them. There are going to be times where I'm going to put a different hat on. I'm going to put my leadership hat on. And that leadership hat is going to be directive. It's going to, delegate. It's going to be more assertive, perhaps not aggressive, but more assertive when I need to, because that is what a leader has to do sometimes. I've got to be able to step into that. But I explain that to my people. I tell them that that's what's going to be happening. I'm going to be laughing with you and having a good time, but there are going to be times when I've got to put that hat on.
Yeah.
And I think if you really, that just takes the jar out of it,
Yeah.
and it also helps me to literally do it when I need to and move between those roles and keep the tension at a nice, balance. Yeah.
I'm finding, and I don't do this as a regular thing, but I'm actually finding that I naturally, when I'm having those more personal well-being conversations, I'll do it with coffee and cake and pastry. And I'm actually thinking that might be a great way to signal, like a different environment. It's a different setting. It's two human beings connecting. We may be talking around some work things, but really my interest in you as a leader at that point is you as a human being, right? It just signals that, perhaps, versus, when we're having a task-based conversation.
Oh, yeah. So, I think the environment, setting up your environments. I do the similar thing, but for me, when I'm in person, I don't mind going for a walk with them. And let's do a walk and talk.
Idea. Yes.
Yes. Because it's not as intense. You're not that you're side by side, as opposed to, and that can work too. Yeah.
Yeah. You've worked in a number of different industries. So you have seen the learning function and now the OD function in different industries. Do you find that there are differences in founder-led businesses, differences in industries? What have you observed?
There's a lot of differences. I think, it all depends, but founder-led, I love the pace of a founder-led. They've got a high energy, right? And there's this, go get them, those entrepreneurs. However, I do find that probably, from my observation, a weakness can often be that, their productivity is measured by pace, or their effectiveness is measured by how fast we can get, because they're wired that way, in a way. So that has been problematic, and I've had to sort of, work around that and be diplomatic and try and sort of say, okay, do we really need it within a week, or can we, there's another. And what often happens is they miss those really good foundations because they haven't taken the time to sort of really, do the deeper work that is required, that they want to go here, but they want to get there so fast that deeper work isn't laid first. So that can be, and then, they'll often see those people coming up and sort of saying, hey, how about we take a step back, as a bit of a wet blanket to their vision and their, however, on the other end of that spectrum, you can get people, in more of a corporate role where, or industries rather, that have just so much deep work done, and they've got, the long tenure of, 30 something years of people being in these roles. The red tape, the chug along, we can't get things done because this person's got to be, so there is a constant work that I think that needs to be done on both ends around ways of working, and a conversation that needs to just be put out on the table of, is this actually working, what we're doing? Are we going too fast? Are we going too slow? How can we do this more effectively? Yeah.
What's the deep work?
Really good question. I think a lot of the time, the people, back to, what we were sort of talking about earlier, is that the people are not necessarily considered that do the work. So I think the deep work is really digging into that, like how are other people going to be affected by these decisions, who needs to be consulted, what procedures and policies and ways of doing things do we need to put in place to make this scalable?
Yeah.
So that it doesn't fall over in the future. Like, let's future-proof it now while we're building it, so that it stands the test of, a couple of years rather than just, a few months. But yeah, considering the people impact, obviously economics and, looking at that. But I think what gets overlooked a lot of the time is the communication channels and who's responsible for things, and documenting things down. I know it sounds boring, but someone's got to do it because what if that, those two people leave the organization?
Exactly.
Now we're stuck. So it's just taking the time to make sure that we're, like I said, we've got some solid foundations that lead us into the future.
I think as I'm listening to you, I mean, one of the biggest things I've learned about my leadership is I need to actually stop and elicit feedback. If you're building an organization, like you're building a car, eventually the engine is going to start to show fumes and it's going to be clunky, right? Human beings will not necessarily show you those things. You actually have to ask them. I think it goes back to what you were saying about cadence, in that founder-led businesses are so used to being responsive to what the client needs and what the opportunities are. And then we go and fix it. Like, we roll up our sleeves. But then when we're too big and too busy, we think, okay, well, I'll just throw that to this person or that person. And meanwhile, that person is just standing there, not even knowing what they're doing, what they're building, how fast you need it, and probably have all the fear of it failing and not succeeding. That, for us founders, we've got a little bit more of a thick skin about, really.
I hear this cry a lot from founders where they'll say, they just don't know how to do it like I know how to do it, or and they just haven't. And what I think we spoke about this again earlier, is that a lot of them, they've got all this amazing vision, but their ability to communicate and get it out of themselves I find they struggle a lot with that. And so they I feel like they often feel like, what needs to be done here and in this organization, it's just going to happen by osmosis. It sort of brings us back, when I think about as a parent, your first child, you just put every bit of energy into that first child. You had, you just had them in swimming lessons when they need, everything. The third one, I don't know, I don't know how he even survives. And I honestly thought that he would just get it all. And to a point, he probably learned a lot of it from his two sisters. But I think at some point, I remember I was asking him to do a task. I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was the dishes or something. And I looked at him and I literally realized I'd never shown him how to do this. I'd never actually. I just thought, he's around. He sees us doing all these things. Surely he could just pick this up and do it. But I hadn't actually taken the time and just actually showed. So I see a lot of founders in that same space. They're so in the future. They're so thinking forward. They're visionaries. They actually haven't, taken the time to actually download their knowledge, their experience, their vision in a way that is, communicated effectively for that person that will support them. Yeah.
And Marni, I would add in our transformation. So if I speak specifically to the audience that this is for, in terms of founders of healthcare businesses, it's also our transformation. Clinical practice has an element of knowledge and wisdom and listening to your client, right? We made a lot of mistakes. Like, our wisdom has grown. We forget that getting to do things the way that we do it actually has, because we've been transformed from being, when we were really basic or foundational in what we did, to all the ways that we learned and mistakes, right? So every time we lead a team and we're trying to get them to take on functions that we have, we've also not only got to map it out, but we've also got to have the patience to journey with people through their own stages. And I think some people will go through those stages quicker, and some people will be more deliberate, but that's not wrong or right. That's just like what you said, understanding people, right? It's giving people the ability to express their autonomy through choice and through how they contribute.
Yeah, well, it kind of leads back to the culture piece, really, because creating a culture where people can actually make mistakes, and that's okay, and ask the dumb questions, and feel like that's all right. And that is, if people are not doing that, you've got to take responsibility for that. 100%. You've got to say, well, I'm, the buck stops with me. If they're 100%. Not coming to me, if they feel like they can't make mistakes, what am I doing to, what's the message that I'm outputting here? So.
Brilliant. So we're going to do a deep dive now for the Private Practice Leadership Accelerator Group. So we will bid farewell to this podcast and we will get stuck into it.
Thanks, Marni. Appreciate it.